Welcome to the financial aid presentation. My name is Melanie Bozio. I am a school counselor at Joliet West High School, and I've been trained as a FAFSA expert by ISAC, which stands for the Illinois Student Assistance Presentation. I will first complete the process for the presentation, which will last about 30 to 45 minutes, and then I'll do my best to answer questions that come through live feed toward the last part of the session. I also have resources to share toward the end of the presentation as well. There are a variety of factors to consider in choosing the right path after high school. We encourage all families to do research and have conversations with their students to gain a better understanding of the process and consider family expectations as well. Every student's path is unique, and your student's counselor is available for conversation and resources to help you throughout the process. Thank you for joining, and let's get started. So you'll see two different costs for attendance with college. There's the published charges and the actual cost of attendance. This chart depicts the average published charges for full-time undergraduate students for public 2-year colleges, public 4-year colleges, out-of-state and in-state, and then also private nonprofit 4-year colleges as well. The published charges refers to the listed charges you will see in documented college websites, brochures, and other college search engines. The net price, however, is what students actually pay. So after we configure how much financial aid a student will receive, we take the average, and that is considered the net price or the actual cost of attendance. This information was found on collegeboard.org, which is a fantastic resource for college searching information regarding AP and SAT testing, and then also some college trends. There's been a dramatic decrease in state resources going to support higher education. Unfortunately, this has then resulted in increased tuition and fees for all public 4-year universities. This chart represents the inflation that schools have experienced as a result and trends in how tuition has been affected. So here are some various ways that the students can get help in financing the cost of college. So because that cost is so drastically, it's been drastically increased, here are some ways to finance the cost of college. So the financial aid programs include filing for the FAFSA, which we will talk about throughout this presentation. The FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and other financial aid programs which will help offset the cost of college. Financial aid for college consists of specific borrowed, given, or earned money that can be found through a variety of sources. And that includes state and federal funding, institutional or college funding, and private aid financial sources. Improve your chances of receiving financial aid by researching your options, planning carefully, and applying for aid early. We can't hate that enough. We definitely want you to apply early for financial aid. There are 529 savings and prepaid tuition programs that you could apply to your tuition, employer tuition reimbursement, and benefit plans. If you work while you're in college, inquire about a tuition reimbursement plan. These types of plans can allow your employer to pay for part or all of your tuition depending on programs and funds available. Such plans are available at certain companies For example, some hospitals nearby will offer tuition reimbursement depending on GPA or course completion. Sometimes they will give the money up front or pay upon completion. UPS is another example of a company that helps our students earn more money toward tuition. And then there's tuition payment plans. So if you have a remaining balance after financial aid is configured, then tuition payment plans might be right for you. You can inquire with each college and you'll pay in installments. The plans vary at each college and many are accompanied with a fee, so just be aware of what the consequence is. Financial aid. So when I speak to financial aid, the purpose is to fill the gap between what your family can afford to pay and the actual published cost of college. We will discuss the FAFSA throughout the presentation and the various components. FAFSA is your first step in the financial aid process. It gives families and students access to federal loans and state aid if it's available. Colleges may also add their own aid, although it is limited and varies from state to state. And they use the information from the FAFSA to determine the amount that's given to the student. So the types of financial aid. There are two different types of aid. There's gift aid and there's self-help aid. Gift aid consists of grants and scholarships. It is assistance that generally does not have to be repaid. So grants are awarded on the basis of a family's financial need or limited ability to meet the cost of college. But there might be some additional opportunities for unique circumstances where we will discuss later. Scholarships may be awarded as well, depending on academic merit or talents, abilities, community service, demographic background, or other attributes that the student may possess. Self-help aid, that involves work study and loans. Work study we'll talk about a little later. Work study aid helps students pay for education costs such as books, supplies, and personal expenses. And it also allows the student the opportunity to gain work experience. Loans are financial aid that must be repaid. Most loans that are awarded based on financial need are low-interest loans sponsored by the federal government. There are other student loans that are not sponsored by the federal government and usually are accompanied with a higher fee or interest rates. The interest rates may not always be fixed in these private lending opportunities as well, so make sure you're cautious of this should you pursue the private lending. The sources of financial aid. So here are, this explains a variety of sources. The federal government is one supplier, and that's administered by the U.S. Department of Education. There's state government. In Illinois, state and some federal financial aid is administered by the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, which is a fantastic organization that I will elaborate on later. Colleges and universities. So colleges and universities and other higher education institutions also offer financial aid assistance to their students. The financial aid office on campus is the best place to inquire about institutional financial aid options. And there are private sources. Many agencies, associations, civic and religious organizations, they can award scholarships to college students. To access these private funds, different eligibility requirements exist. There are different award amounts, application forms, and deadlines. They all apply to these components. So be sure to research them carefully and definitely early. There are scholarship deadlines even now for our current seniors. So grants and scholarships. I listed here 3 need-based scholarships. So the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, is required to determine a student's eligibility for federal and state grants, as well as student loans and other types of aid that are administered by the college or the university. By completing a FAFSA, students are considered and may qualify for some or all 3 of these need-based grants. So the State of Illinois Monetary Award, the MAP grant, that's one of the largest state programs in the country, giving assistance to students demonstrating financial need. The Pell Grant is available at the federal level, and that's to undergraduate students, and it's the largest grant program administered on that federal level. And finally, the FSEOG, that's through financial aid as well, and that gives priority to students in exceptional financial need. And like I said, that's on the federal level. So to apply for all 3 of these need-based grants, then you must complete the FAFSA. So ISAC, as I mentioned earlier, Illinois Student Assistance Commission, administers financial aid programs for Illinois residents. The Illinois Veterans Grant Program and the Illinois National Guard Grant Program awards eligible recipients regardless of funding level, so regardless of what other aid they're receiving. It does pay tuition and fees at all Illinois public universities and public community colleges. Independent of police, fire, and correctional officers. So if a correctional officer employed by the Illinois Department of Corrections is in a security position, or Illinois police officer or fire officer, if they are killed or sustained a major injury resulting in permanent disability, so the technical qualification for that is at least 90%, in the line of duty, the officer's spouse and children may receive grant assistance toward tuition and mandatory fees. Next, the Minority Teacher of Illinois Scholarship Program. That encourages academically talented minority students to pursue careers as teachers at nonprofit Illinois schools. Recipients must sign an agreement promising to start teaching within 1 year for each year of scholarship assistance received. If the teaching obligation is not fulfilled, then the lender is responsible to pay back that scholarship, and it converts to a loan at 5%. The Illinois Special Education Teacher Tuition Waiver. That exempts recipients from the payment of tuition and mandatory fees for up to 4 calendar years at any of the 112 public four-year colleges in Illinois. It encourages academically talented students who have to apply to pursue a career at nonprofit Illinois public, private, or parochial preschool, elementary, or secondary school teachers in any area of special education. So that's on a limited basis. Students must apply to be eligible. And as I mentioned, it is only available at one of the 12 public four-year colleges for students to receive this. All of these programs must be, in order to receive these, you must fill out the FAFSA to be eligible. Other grants and scholarship at the federal level. The Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant is available to students whose parents or guardian was a member of the U.S. Armed Forces and unfortunately died as a result of service performed in Iraq or Afghanistan after September 11, 2011. The Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education, or TEACH grant, rewards students who are or will be taking coursework necessary to become elementary or secondary teachers. Recipients must sign an agreement to serve elementary or secondary teaching positions, and they must agree to teach in a teacher shortage area. The estimated annual TEACH grant will award just above $3,000. There are campus-based programs as well, and these are administered directly by the financial aid office at each participating school. So how much a student can receive from these programs depends on financial need or the amount of other aid received and on the availability of funds at the particular college. So there are a lot of factors configured into campus-based programs. Unlike the federal Pell Grant program, which provides funds to every eligible student, the campus-based programs provide a certain number of funds for each to administer each year. So when the money runs out, then there are no more awards given. So again, we want you to apply as early as possible and make sure you meet the deadlines for these campus-based funds. So again, you must complete the FAFSA as early as October 1st. Federal Work Study, just to go into this a little more, is a need-based financial aid program that allows eligible students to work part-time on or off campus. A work study job is different from other jobs in the following reasons. So one, the hours are flexible to ensure that students have enough time to study, and oftentimes those jobs are conducive to a study environment. So they may be checking in IDs and still have the opportunity to work on their assignments in between checking IDs, or working at the library. Those are two good examples. When students apply for financial aid the following year, money earned through this program is not used to determine financial need for the next school year. So that's another benefit. To be considered for a federal work study, you must indicate that you're interested on the FAFSA. And this is another program where the funds are limited, so it's important to complete the FAFSA as soon as possible. So to go in more depth about the loan programs, these are some things to consider when you're choosing the right loan option. So first of all, what is a loan? It's a type of self-help aid that lets students borrow money from the government, banks, or other lending institutions. However, loans must be paid back with added interest. Always borrow conservatively, accepting only the amount of money that you need, and then also compare to find out which loan options you have that are better than others. So they are awarded based on need, or there are some that are non-need based. Loan eligibility usually will be determined after grants, scholarships, and federal work study programs have been considered. So there may be some other factors affecting how many loans a student is eligible for. Some other basics that you should know, as listed here: sources of the loan, so whether it's coming from a private source or the federal loans. Also the subsidized versus unsubsidized, which we'll talk about in a second. Interest rate, obviously you want the lowest interest rate possible, and the repayment options and grace period. So between subsidized and unsubsidized loans, to differentiate between the two, we really want to focus on when the interest will start to accrue. Eligibility for subsidized federal Stafford loans is based on financial need. So subsidized is based on need. That's important to remember. The federal government pays the interest on your behalf at least half time during your grace period and authorized deferment periods. So grace period means after you graduate and a few months beyond that. They can range from 6 months to 9 months. You just have to pay attention to each individual loan. And then also the authorized deferment periods. That might be awarded based on lack of employment. So that's something that you'll have to go through directly with the loan agency to apply. The eligibility for unsubsidized federal Stafford loan is different. It's non-based on financial need, and you are responsible for paying interest at all times. So you are allowed to begin payment on the interest while in school, the interest that you're accruing. If you allow it to accrue, the interest will be added to your principal balance to be paid off with interest with the rest of your loan when you stop attending on at least a half-time basis. So that's the difference between the two. If you're eligible for a subsidized loan, that's clearly the better option of the two. So a few more loans. The Perkins loan is a subsidized loan. The federal government pays the entire interest while you're in school at least half time, and this grace period is 9 months after you separate from the school. The college will act as the lender in this case and does pull from a limited source of funds. So this is one loan, again, that requires immediate attention for the FAFSA, apply as early as possible to be eligible for a Perkins loan. Oftentimes this requires additional paperwork or promissory notes that students will have to sign, and that's usually conducted through the university. So make sure you, the family and the student is paying attention to those pieces of information. The federal Stafford loan program, that allows students to borrow money with low interest for educational expenses. There are two types of federal Stafford loans, like we discussed, the subsidized and the unsubsidized. Federal plus loans. This allows parents to borrow on behalf of their dependent undergraduate students or even graduate and professional students. But remember that the federal student loans generally have the lowest interest rates and fees and the greatest repayment flexibility when compared to some private lending. Should your student and the family not have enough federal loans or state loans to cover the tuition, then you can resort to the private lending. Sometimes you'll get good options, but the risk is, like I mentioned, the repayment plans and also the interest rate, and it could be, it's not fixed all the time. So how to apply for the FAFSA? There are multiple ways to access it. However, we always encourage our students to submit electronically. You must obtain an FSA ID number, which is essentially your electronic legal signature. You can apply for an FSA ID before October 1st, and if you electronically file, you can designate up to 10 schools to receive your financial aid information. If a student changes their mind about where they will attend, you can always log back in and change those schools, but the benefit of applying electronically allows students to apply or designate 10 schools to receive their financial information. If you submit the paper copy, which you can go to the website and download a copy, the max is 4 colleges. Data retrieval is another really great feature. It's a time-saving feature that allows you to automatically transfer your tax data from IRS into that FAFSA. You must be eligible for that option, but most people are. More on filing for the FAFSA. So the FAFSA applications must be filed every single year a student is in school. It's encouraged to complete the FAFSA as early as possible after October 1st. Pay attention to each individual school. They might have their own deadline for FAFSA submission, and they range depending on state. So if your student's going out of state, that's also important to consider. You will use your income tax report from 2016 to file for the FAFSA. Okay, so what documents do you need in order to file? Be sure to use your social security number and that it's correct. You may need an alien registration number if you're not a U.S. citizen. If the parent is not a U.S. citizen without an alien registration number, then they will enter all zeros. but the student applying for aid must have a social security number to apply for the FAFSA or be an eligible non-citizen. If you believe you're an eligible non-citizen, please speak to your counselor for assistance or seek help from individual colleges. There is a Dreamers Club at Joliet West High School. It's a safe club where your information is kept discreet. So if you have questions, you can seek out myself or Christina Austin for more assistance on this matter. You must enter your driver's license. If you and the student have driver's license, make sure you enter those numbers and enter them correctly. Include records of income and tax information. If available, refer to your W-2 forms, the federal income tax return, the IRS 1040, 1040A, or 1040EZ. Another thing that must be reported, but I want to be clear on what assets are. That includes savings, certificates of deposit, stock options, bonds, 529 college savings programs, and investment in real estate, business, and farm. But the FAFSA does indicate the parameters of what you need to report for investments, so make sure you're clear on that. Assets do not include retirement accounts or 401ks or your primary home. If you own an additional home, that's something that's considered an asset. And then also with the real estate, business, and farm, there are parameters for that, so just be clear on how much you make in a year and who is employed for you. So this diagram depicts the expenses a student is likely to accrue while in college and give you the actual cost of attendance. Okay. Tuition and fees are considered direct expenses, and room and board are considered either direct or indirect. It just depends on the living situation. Some institutions require students to live on campus, maybe a minimum of 2 years, so they all vary. It's important to ask these questions when you go on college visits or while researching different colleges. Transportation, books, and supplies, and miscellaneous living expenses are indirect expenses and can vastly range in costs. Students have a few ways that they can cut costs in the indirect expenses category. So choosing more affordable apartments, applying to become a resident assistant, scaling back on some meal plans, purchasing used books compared to new. Those are some examples of how costs can fluctuate. So we really just need to teach our students to ball on a budget. For instance, I went to Illinois State University, and since I've been back, the apartments available to students is pretty interesting. There are some with hot tubs in the apartment, and then I look back to where I lived and I shared a room with someone while I was living in an apartment. So there are a lot of ways that you can cut back on costs for the indirect expenses. So expected family contribution. This is something that you'll want to pay attention to when you get your SAR or your student aid report. And you'll want to make sure you check everything in detail. The information you report on your free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA, is used to calculate your EFC. It's a measure of your family's financial strength and is calculated according to a formula established by law. Your family's taxed and untaxed income, your assets, the benefits, such as unemployment or Social Security, are all considered in the formula. All considered are your family size, also considered are your family size and the number of family members who are attending college during the year. So your EFC is a number used by your school to calculate the amount of federal student aid you are eligible to receive. So to determine the cost of attendance, it's cost of attendance minus expected family contribution, and that helps determine the family's financial need, the EFC. The goal of the financial aid process is to meet the student's financial needs. That may not always happen, but they do the best they can with that calculated. Okay, so a few important dates and things to remember when filing for the FAFSA. Watch for the documents that are coming in the mail or electronically so you can check for accuracy. It seems like a long process, but typically college acceptance letters and financial aid award letters are distributed. Some are already given, but typically in February or March, so timelines can vary. Although the goal is to meet the student's financial needs, there may be significant financial need after completing the FAFSA, and parents can seek out other sources of funding through scholarship searches or private lending. However, we encourage families to read everything carefully when looking to borrow through a bank or private funding sources. Be sure to confirm attendance at the university of choice by paying the housing deposit. If you neglect to do this, it may mean losing the opportunity to attend. That's happened in the past, and we don't want to see that happen, so just make sure you and the student are paying attention to important deadlines. Additional paperwork that is required, such as signing promissory notes, as I mentioned, with the Perkins loan, and completing entrance counseling and exit counseling as well. While we want to promote responsible lending, we also want families to make the most informed decision. We encourage students to apply for prospective colleges early by November 1st to ensure early application deadlines. We encourage to complete the FAFSA early as October 1st, and look for scholarships throughout their entire senior year. Then when final award letters arrive, you can make the best decision after reviewing all of the facts, including financial aspect. So again, apply early as October 1st, or as soon as you can after this date. Other things to consider is the family structure as well. If parents are married or living together, provide information of both parents. If the family, if it's a single parent, then provide the information of that parent. If there are divorced parents, be sure to provide the information of the parent with whom the student has lived with more than half the time during the past year. Or a widowed or divorced parent that have remarried. Answer the questions about both parent and step-parent if they are actually legally married. Also keep documents of everything that you submit. Sometimes schools will do loan verification and they'll require you to submit additional forms. So just be sure to save everything and be prepared for that. Some universities do 100% verification. And then reapply every single year that the student will be attending college. Okay, so the FAFSA makes it very interactive and easy to complete. If you have questions, then they have the help and hints section. So as you can see on the screen, it's toward the right. You can pay attention to that, and it'll tell you which line of your tax form to find the answer for that question. Also, they have FAFSA at any time. They do have the toll-free number, or you can use the online chat feature to answer your questions immediately. Here are a few other helpful resources. Personally, at Joliet West High School, we have Carlotta Abogado. She's our ISAC representative for Joliet West and the Joliet Junior College District. Her phone number is indicated above. Carlotta is fantastic. She comes to our school in the Media Center every other week on Tuesdays to work with our school. She meets with students individually and helps them in planning for college, and also preparing for the financial aid process as well. So ISAC in general is a tremendous asset, and reach out to them if you have any questions. And then also we have a big event coming up, Parent University. That's held on November 7th from 6 to 8. So please join us for this event. One of the breakout sessions will be a FAFSA completion workshop. So we'll have members of the ISAC team here to assist our families in a computer lab to complete the FAFSA. We also have Spanish-speaking representatives in attendance as well. So we hope to see you there. That completes my presentation, so I can now open this up to questions that have been coming in through live feed. Okay, so we have no questions as of right now. Should you have any questions regarding the financial aid process or college in general, please contact your school counselor. Information can be found on our GTHS website. And also the ISAC representative whose information is listed on this presentation.